Well, Ibrahim al-Marashi is a Middle East historian. He's also an associate professor at the Department of History at California State University. He says the rhetoric between Tehran and D.C. is worrying.
I am worried. Just for one, the tensions can be ratcheted up with 140 characters. Never in kind of diplomatic history can I think of a time when diplomatic tensions can be so easily escalated. And at the same time, there's a lot of unintended consequences that I think neither side has anticipated. These
attacks on Saudi oil interests that Saudi and obviously the U.S. blames on Iran, but Iran says, these are not, this is obviously stage managed. Aside from the tweets, there are also these actions. So where does that go?
Besides these tweets, these are actually concrete actions. In the case with the rocket attack against the grain zone, no one has claimed responsibility, and there is a possibility ISIS might be behind such an attack, since it would benefit from its former enemies, both the U.S. and Iran, who were once allied to combat ISIS. If they would fight each other, that would give breathing space to ISIS to emerge. That could be one of the unintended consequences. The drone attacks on the Saudi pipelines, the Houthis of Yemen did claim responsibility for that. Sure. And they have such a position where that gives Iran plausible deniability. It was simply a Houthi attack. They've done this before. This wasn't us, but it's an indirect demonstration of how Iran could influence the region.
Right. But what does worry you most as far as what's going on behind the scenes? Is there a serious problem with Saudi pushing a very particular agenda, as well as who has Saudi's ear in the U.S. government, not just Donald Trump, but men like John Bolton, who have a pretty miserable history of warmongering in the U.S.?
Sure, there's Saudi Arabia, there's John Bolton, and there's no way of knowing that if any kind of incident that sparks a kind of military conflagration, do we know, this isn't a transparent episode, do we really know who's behind it? There's, Saudi Arabia would definitely benefit from this conflict. John Bolton also has a domestic base. He has kind of his domestic constituencies that he's trying to appease. And so both of those actors that you mentioned, whether it's somebody in the Trump administration or Riyadh, both would benefit from a conflict.
Right. Could all this, though, be reversed in 2020? If Trump isn't reelected?
It would if you look at the policy of, for example, Bernie Sanders. He's very much calling for reconciliation between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Basically, instead of siding with one regional actor, as Trump does with Saudi Arabia, Bernie Sanders has called for Saudi Arabia and Iran to come to a negotiating table. And if the U.S. is behind that, it has the liability of succeeding. Biden, if he gets elected, he was vice president under Obama, and Obama's signature diplomatic achievement was the nuclear deal. He will most likely recommit. So if you have any of those two Democratic candidates, definitely I think you would see a recalibration of U.S.-Iran relations.